Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Faris Alami with us today. Faris is CEO at International Strategic Management, ISM. He's a speaker, an author, founder, a CEO. He's also CEO at Connecting Dots Globally. We're going to talk about that. Business advisor at Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program and special advisor for a few initiatives. He's also host at FinGen podcast show. So theoretically, we should have a very cool pod today. We're going to talk about global community leadership, SME development, and entrepreneurship. Faris is in Detroit, so with a bit of luck, we will talk about Detroit and developments happening in the city right now. Former glorious city for those that studied the history of Detroit with the car manufacturing, GM, and everything that goes with it. So Faris, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you so much, Charles, and thanks for hosting me and for all the things that you do as well. Yeah, well, I think you did a great job doing an introduction. I'm not sure if I could add much more to it. I'm lucky to be in Detroit. I think Detroit is a cool place. I've been here for 20 years, and the development in Detroit in general has been just incredible. I usually use that as a place to talk about, just because the fact that to your point, a lot of people think Detroit went through hard times, and it's true, and it started recovering in early 2000s. Still was going maybe through rough times, but started recovering. And I would say by 2012, 2014, most people who visited it then would not recognize it if they visited before 2008. So it's completely changed. And I'm lucky because I do this kind of entrepreneurship and small business development programs all over the world. And I get to meet cool people like you, Charles, whether it's Zoom or in person, through the different programs that I get to deliver or design through the partners that we work with. So it's really, for me, rewarding to be able to do such work. But usually it's development to entrepreneurship program, development of small business programs, deployment of those programs, coaching, mentorship, strategy for funding, those kinds of things, business planning. The list is long. So I think we could talk about the work as we have this conversation.
Yeah, before we do, I always love asking my guests, what's your story? What's your struggle? And what's your current life season that you're into at the moment?
Yeah, I think, we all have stories. I don't think I've yet met to meet anyone that does not have a struggle or a story that they had to, at least tell themselves about. That's, I think, part of our life. My, my stories, as you may know, just knowing that you've done so much work already in the background, like, coming up from a war, time to, living, being a little homeless at the time, and struggling through immigration for almost 18 years, fight, and then, starting these different businesses through the journey and finishing college and doing, starting a family and doing all those things. That's really part of my story. And then my struggle, I think every day is a struggle, because you just have to, face whatever challenges you want. I mean, I was talking to one of my kids, helping them understand it's okay to have a no. I said, do you know how many no's I hear every day? They're like, you hear none. I'm like, no, I hear lots of no's every day. We do a lot of proposals and requests for proposals, or even people demand that we submit something, and we still get, not accepted, or not in the terms that we wanted. So, I struggle every day to make sure that my team is, having enough rewarding work, and the company has enough cash to keep going. I mean, that's a daily struggle. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah. Love the struggle though. Love the pain. I guess you somewhat need to convert your brain into a pain-loving machine if your number one goal is progress. That is, because I feel like I maxed out happiness at one season of my life, was traveling the world, penthouses. I'm not saying I'm not having luxury right now. I still have that, but I maxed out that season of my life. Or when I was this hedonic, drunk boy at 17 years old, tasting all the pleasures of life. Nowadays, it's more about progress, and progress bring me a different kind of happiness. I'm not sure how to put it into words, but I feel I had to convert that switch into my brain that makes me love pain nowadays. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. So one of the things I have a conversation with some of my friends about is I seem to do really well when there's a problem.
A
So
hard
people,
problem. The harder, the better.
yeah, the harder the better, right? So and that seems to be my kind of like my journey in a way, that anytime there's a problem or there's a conflict or there's something going wrong, that seems to when I could do really well or think through really well or figure out things much better. And I think part of it is maybe to your point is that our brain as humans are designed to progress, right? To just keep moving forward. And unless we work harder against that, it's usually your brain is just wanting to progress every day. Maybe I'm weird like you in that kind of way, right? I don't know, since you said that earlier. Uh, it just seems like I like to face challenges. I like to have no problems in my life, but it seems like that has never, I've never faced that yet. And most of the people I've worked with, they might have an easier life, but they still have problems or challenges that they have to overcome themselves. And what seems to be a small challenge to me is a big challenge to them. So it just really is perspective and how people deal with it. And so that would be my short answers, that I feel that
Yeah,
problems can help us progress.
it's a good one. Do you feel that the current environment, because you and I, we operate in this capitalist system, it wasn't always that way. And if we go back to the medieval age, the life there was quite hard. You had terrain that you needed to harvest. That terrain was owned by someone hired on the pedestal. There was also less humans back in the days. But it seems to me that the landscape, the economic landscape that you and I were competing in and we're also cooperating in, it keeps getting harder and harder. I reflect a lot on that. And the reason is quite simple, is that there's alphas like you and I that keep on getting better and better. And um, I mean, I want to give a shot to the newer generations, right? This podcast a way to do so, but it seems to me that it keeps getting harder. And the new generations, I don't feel they're ready to face that. And I certainly had a hard time getting in the professional market and to adapt my brain that was wired to have fun, play video games, and party. So do you agree with the fact that it keeps getting harder? And what do you think about the opinions I just put forward?
I think I think two things. One is I agree it's getting harder because it's much harder now to get attention. Meaning that, an example would be podcasts, right? So if you were a podcaster 15 years ago, there were a few hundreds, maybe a few thousands. Today, there are a few hundreds, a few thousands launching every day. Not saying they're good or bad. It's just they're so to get that attention or to get that noise to come to you is just much harder. Same thing when I use the example of my company. When I registered back in 2003 in Detroit, when I looked and said, okay, how many companies are in this, index code that I'm in? There were like over 3,000 of them. So, where, 20, 50 years before, you might have been the one person or the one company or the 10 companies in town. Now I'm one of 3,000 in one category. So, to get attention and to get some noise towards you, it makes it a little harder. In the same time, I feel like the access that you and I have today, living in the Western world, it's much, it makes things a little bit easier to enter. So there's more easier to entry. It's a little harder to sustain or to grow. But the access and the knowledge, to your point earlier when we were talking before we started the recording, you could go today to Google or to any other platform and search, and you could really, get the knowledge that someone could have in a degree or a PhD, or that would take them 20 years to get. In next 20 minutes, you could get some information. Now, you're not going to get the same information, but I'm saying that you could start accessing to some of this information. Where before you had to, show up physically somewhere and physically be somewhere to access those kinds of things, and you had smaller circles. They still exist. I can't say that they don't exist, but the accessibility is becoming a little bit easier today. So I agree with you that it is harder to get attention, and at the same time, I would say it's easier to get started.
So many questions to ask you because you're into so many fields, but let's start with the board. It seems that the board positions you occupy, that seems to catch my interest. Board seats is somewhat interesting. It's gives you a variety of experiences. You get in touch with various people, so it opens a lot of doors. Sometimes you also get paid for these positions. So what's your strategy behind getting that many board seats on that many organizations? Because I believe you sit on like eight positions there. And what have you been gaining from these board members slash seats positions of yours?
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, so most of the boards that I serve on are nonprofits. So most of them, I have few that are for profits. And what I gained the most out of it is really one, the concept or the idea of feeling good, maybe, right? To be able to give back to the community that you live in, and to really leverage the network that I've created over the years to provide to such causes that I care for, or at least think that I want to contribute to. So it gives you access to this wonderful information and insights on a much higher level to be able to see. Also, people, it's kind of like, if I'm driving the car, I can see the road ahead. But if I'm on the plane, I can see the map ahead. And that just gives you better insights on strategizing and what you could do to, whether it's my own company or the city that I live in or the organization that I care for, to guide them or to provide insights that they not to say that they have to listen to it, but at least they could maybe consider as they move towards whatever steps they could have or next action steps that they want to take.
The
So
podcast,
yeah.
what was your objective with it? You started 2 years ago, and do you feel you've accomplished these objectives?
Yeah, the podcast, The Finjan Show, objective was really clear. Many people were asking me for years to start it, and I was recording podcasts for years before, but I never really publicized it. Was too embarrassed to publicize. And then when it became clear that the message was really still missing, the number one thing I wanted to accomplish with is to provide a platform for individuals that I call them your everyday entrepreneurs, to bust the myths about entrepreneurship and say that you don't have to be rich. Forget this whole concept that you want to start a business so you could be a millionaire or billionaire. I know so many wonderful entrepreneurs, amazing entrepreneurs, that they're not millionaires, they're not billionaires, and they don't want to be millionaires or billionaires. They either found a problem in their community that they wanted to solve, or they saw an opportunity that they wanted to provide, and they're making a living. They're living. Are they struggling? Sure, they struggle, but who doesn't? Do they continue to move forward? They do. And some of them have been there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. But unfortunately, the media does not give them the attention that they want because they're not a shiny object, right? They're opening a restaurant or a coffee shop or IT service company or a training company or whatever company. And they're just doing what they would like to do or wanting to do or needing to do to provide what they're trying to provide, whether it's for themselves or for the communities that they're in. And I wanted to bring that up to people's attention. The second thing was to bust some myths about entrepreneurship. Because sure, it sounds really easy and you could just start, but it also is a lot of work. As you know, you got to work all the time. You got to contribute to it. You got to be open. You got to change. So it has a lot of, things like that I wanted to make sure. And in the process, because of my work with the organization that supports entrepreneurs, it became clear that some of them were asking me like, well, can you share the insights that you gained from working with these other organizations? So I started 1 week interviewing entrepreneurs like you, and we're, looking forward to having you on the podcast as well. And then the other week, I'm basically answering questions or responding to ideas that someone have asked me to share in a meaning way. And I try to keep it within the 10 minutes. They call them, as you know, micro podcast. And although I do believe longer podcasts have a purpose, my podcast, I think within the 10 minutes, I'm trying to get to the guts and the minds of the entrepreneurs of why they started and what they're doing. And then not really about their work. I really care less what they're doing in that kind of fashion. I care for them and for the community that they're doing it, but not for the podcast. The podcast is thinking why you started, what are you doing, what are some struggles, what are some of the wins, and how do you keep moving forward to break those myths about entrepreneurship and starting a business and things of that nature. So I feel like I don't ever feel like I ever accomplish anything. I feel like I'm on a journey of accomplishing it. Um, I have seen some feedback that makes me feel that I've accomplished some of that because people will email me or ask me and or thank me, and I'll be like I was in Spain and someone will like, oh, thank you so much for the podcast. I've been listening it for it. I'm like, oh, well, you're welcome. What was your take on it? And they'll tell me. So I feel like it has accomplished some of those, but I don't feel like I'm done. I feel like I'm just beginning, and there's, as you know, so much more to do.
Israel Gaza conflict. It seems that the world is doing well on some points. It seems that on some other points, like the environment and wars, we're not doing that well. I have a bunch of Israeli friends. I've had a bunch of Arab CEOs on the pod. I get well with UAE's people, Saudis as well. Oddly enough, I even after reading the MBS book, it seems that these parts are more progressive. But well, I love Startup Nation, that's for sure. So I'm biased, but the point is, why are people killing one another nowadays? Do you feel commerce can help people trade with one another, stop fighting? Is religion at play here? It's a complex issue, and obviously we can't stop an extreme conflict like that extremely, right? Like put it to zero. That's almost impossible. But what have you been observing on your side, and what could be potential solutions to that deadly conflict?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Charles. I mean, I really appreciate actually your thoughts on that. Two things. One, I would say it's not complex. It's not a complex situation. It's really simple, straightforward challenge, and it's really an occupation versus people who wanted to live free. I think people play the religion card because it makes people more emotional and it draws them in because, if I say God told me to do something, then more people will listen. But it's not really a religious problem at all. As a matter of fact, if you look through history, pre 1947, 48 and 47, pre 1948, so 47 and before, Jews, Muslims, Christians, mostly, can't say that's 100% because there are always going to be some weirdos, right? I always tell people the 0.01% of the population will always be there, meaning that they're really extreme to either directions, whatever religion, whatever non-religion, whatever you want to believe, there always will be those. But mostly they lived in peaceful and harmony. My dad grew up with all kinds of different religions in Palestine. And they played together, they celebrated together, they had all kinds of stuff together. The challenge it becomes is when an foreign forces comes and occupy your land and then tries to every day dehumanize you. Unfortunately, human nature, just like you said, you want to keep going. It's going to make you fight back to say, no, I want to live. I want to also prosper. I want to have food on my table. I want to be able to go to school without being shot at and being called names. So those kinds of things, I think that's really the essence of what needs to change. We have to change how we treat each other. I do believe commerce can help, but it's clearly from my perspective, if commerce is going, but you're dehumanizing me every day, it makes it really hard for that to prosper and keep going. So it needs to be a balance between freedom for people to live and then the freedom to do commerce. I think those two combinations could do really well. But I don't think it's that complex. I really believe and know because I have the same. I have lots of wonderful friends from the Israeli side, and as well, of course, as you know, my family's from Gaza. So the key is to really just open it up to, first of all, to the people who have, I call it brain and hearts and minds, and not the ones with the guns and shooting, because that we could never solve 100%, but I think we could suppress it. I think of like, the KKK and many other organizations. They still could exist, but minimizing their or any other group in that kind of way, ISIS or anything like that, it could still exist, but you want to minimize what they can do to harm others. That's really the key. But the only way to do that is to make it prospering for everyone else. You can't make it prosper for one group, not the other, and then say it's okay.
It's just I have a hard time seeing how the situation can get better if media is so polarizing, you know. We You share content, and I've seen on your Twitter, I believe people share content from both sides, you know, and they're like, "Yo, this is what they've done," you know, and then that content spreads to more people, reinforcing some beliefs. Twitter has tried to put some objectivity into this with their moderating features, like, oh, this is the right source of info, but that's not even impartial. Impartiality is really tough, you know, because in reality, there's no one side that's right or wrong. It's in percentages, right? And percentages is another mental model that us human brains resonate well with. Then there's people like me on a daily basis that reads Wikipedia. Wikipedia is run by a community that is also biased, right? And the victors tend to rewrite history pretty well. So, what would be a system that could bring some objectivity, some clarity, less, probably a bit less emotions, and would help people gather the facts better so that we can come up with short-term resolutions and eventually like real-term solutions and end the war and the BS.
No, love that. So I agree. I think the key to your point, Charles, I think one of the things that from a Palestinian perspective is that the Palestinian voices have never been heard, right? So, I mean, I could tell you that much. I mean, my parents both were born in what's historically known as a Palestine 1948, and they were never heard. My dad refused to register as a refugee. As a matter of fact, that word never existed in our home because it's like, I have a home, I'm going to go back to it. And then my mom, was caught crossing, so she was registered forcefully through the UN in 1947 or 48. So, these are things that I think from a Palestinian perspective, the world just needs to be aware of it because I think most people just are not aware of the real problem. And those who visit the region could see really what's going on the ground because I agree there are lots of propaganda out there, but the reality on the ground is the Palestinians don't have a life, right? They're under oppression. There's a wall of separation. They have different ID system. They can't move. I can't go visit Gaza despite the fact that my parents from there. My refugee document most of my life till I became an American. You couldn't go anywhere, including the country that gave it to you. My brother just uh, got rid of it and became a Palestinian passport holder. He can even go to Palestine despite the fact he carries that, right? So these are real struggles for people on a daily basis. It's not like once in a, I always feel it's not an episode that you watch in the middle and you're like, okay, I could catch up later. This is a daily struggle for every day. Till we address it, I think we're not going to go too far, right? So I call it fighting the moments, meaning, of course, killing of anybody from my perspective is horrifying, um, whether it's a civilian or a kid or a woman or anything, including soldiers. I don't want soldiers to fight. They do choose to do that, so that's between them and themselves. I don't want to get involved. But from a civilian perspective, because that's who I am, killing of anyone is just not fair because you're just trying to go to work or trying to go do whatever you're trying to do, and you're just trying to be the person you are. So I think till we address that, right, so that every single human, period, doesn't matter what their religion is, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter what color, doesn't matter what they believe, as long as they don't believe killing other people, of course, right, then they should be able to live. And majority, I would say 99.999% of the populations in any nation is probably going to want to do that. They just want to live. They want to be able to be acknowledged for as a person, and they should not have to fight every day to say, I'm human being, treat me like human. Until that is solved, I don't think we're going to have, we could just kid ourselves with tactics. Bombing, as you know, bombing every building in Gaza is not going to solve the problem. I think it's just going to elevate it. Even evacuating them all, right? They're talking about ethnically cleansing all of the population to different places. That's not going to solve the problem because you still got the West Bank, the East Jerusalem, and other people that not only them, but also their kids and grandkids and great grandkids that are still living this situation that they need to really end, right? So till we really think through how can we make every human feel like a human and allow them to live, then it's really hard for anyone to accept that. You wouldn't accept it if someone treated you like crap every single day, spit on your face, and called you names. And I'm sure you heard what right away. So they, what they said on TV. I tell people it's the sugar code of what they tell you in private. So when they call you, human animals and we need to wipe them out, that's like the nice words that they said on TV. Can you imagine what they're saying in private or what they're doing? And I definitely don't, if you look through all my posts throughout my whole journey as a Palestinian, despite the fact that I knew that I should have probably been posting before 2000, before October, I should have been posting 2022 because one of the questions I always ask people, how many Palestinians do you think were killed in 2022? And most people are like, what are you talking about? None. I'm like, okay, why don't you search Beit Salem, an Israeli Jewish group that tells you, unfortunately, how many civilian Palestinians are killed every year. And then I asked my other question, how many houses do you think were demolished from a Palestinian territory in 2022? Forget 23. There are, of course, 1,000 of them in 23, but forget that. 2022 or 2021 or 2020 or 2019 or 2018. You can go all the way back to 1948. Um, the truth is, there's another group called Israeli Committee Against House Demolishment. So there are so many wonderful people that are trying to raise the information out to say, we have a problem and we need to fix it as a community, global community. Until that is fixed, really, I feel like it's just the conversations, right? It's just a tic-tac back and forth. It's not gonna solve it. If you really want to solve it, you gotta get to the core. And I think the world is ready to solve it for the core, but I'm not sure if the US and Israel is ready to solve it to the core because it might require some real sacrifice and real action. And I speak that as an American, right? I mean, I live here and I'm lucky to be in that kind of space, but I really also believe that there has to be some real action. Can be talks, can be, like my mom's house was bombed just a couple of weeks ago. For what? None of my family members is anything to do with any of the groups, right? Of the whether it's Fatah or Islamic or anything. We're just my uncle saved his life 40 years being exiled to live, to work, to save. My grandfather the same, my aunts the same, my other uncle the same, to build this house, and they just moved into it, and then it just gets bombed because they're just bombing everything. It's
In
not fair, right?
Palestine, where
Yeah, in
exactly?
Gaza,
In
in
Gaza.
Gaza. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So to me is like, that's not going to solve your problem. That's probably going to create more problems because I'm lucky enough, and my uncle, I talked to him just a couple of days ago. He's lucky to say, you know what, now what? But he's not going to pick up a gun and go fight, but there will be some that will, because now you just destroyed my 80-year dream of having this home after you already pushed me out of 48 to push me to this little strip, which I'm happy with, okay, and I want to live, and now you drop a bomb on the civilians, right? So these things are just not going to get us anywhere. We got to be able to talk it through. We got to be able to sit down and have, I call it human to human conversation. Forget the emotions. That's why I didn't get emotional in this part. I just said, here are the facts. The fact number one, we were evacuated from 48. Fact number two, 67. Fact number three, a house got demolished now, just last week. Fact number four, my cousin is picked up in the safe road that you're supposed to pick up. So these are not stories that I'm hearing from someone else. These are things that I know on a personal level firsthand. So therefore, if I know it at my personal and then I see it, other people are saying it, I know it's true. I mean, many times I'll be honest with you, Charles, throughout the years, many times, especially even this since October, I read something and I'm like, that can't be true. There's no way. And then I'm like, okay, let me just dig deeper. And I'm like, oh my God, it is true. Oh my, no, I still can't believe it. Let me look again. And it becomes true. And I'm like, wow, are we that human have advanced so much, but we as a human have not advanced. We've advanced everything around us. You and I are able to talk through this nice Zoom call. And, you're in Mexico, I'm in Michigan. But as a human being, we still have a long way to go. Anyway,
Such a, well, you said it's a simple problem. I don't agree with that. I think it's a very hard problem. Even, like myself, for example, I had a very long journey to growth, did 10 days silent retreat, really tough stuff. And even sometimes I find myself getting out of control, and being angry at some people and being vengeful. So
but why do you say it's hard? What's so hard about solving an occupation problem? If you were talking about specifically Gaza and
because if I kill your cousin, you'll probably want to kill mine, like that's, I mean, you and I were educated people. We're like 0.001% of society. Most humans, the struggle of life is so hard. Now imagine in Gaza, for example, and the Jews have such heavy history with being cleansed, Arabs too, you know, um, and then it brings this vengefulness, like the feeling of sadness is converted into anger. And I'm pretty sure if someone would kill my wife, I'd want to hit them back. Um, and that's not the best decision. And then people under power, that's the same. They also seek power. I think we should book around too, because this call is about to end in like a minute and a half. But I will ask you to refer me more Palestinians to this spawn, because you probably know a bunch that would be able to talk about that too. Because yeah, I haven't got enough people on this spot to talk about this so far, on the Palestinian side at least. And yeah, I'm interested to do a round two with you. Where can people find out more about you until then?
oh, you're very kind. Yeah, and I agree. There's a much more conversations to have on this topic. But obviously, they can go visit our website, mysminc.com or Connecting Dots Globally. I'm, of course, on LinkedIn and many of the social media platforms as well. But I really want to thank you for being such open and such a uh, wonderful host. And I appreciate all the conversations we had. And I wish you continued success. And hopefully, you will join me in my podcast so I could also share your story that I know a little bit of through my readings, but I'd love for you to unfold it.
100%.